Welcome students. Today we are going to discuss Unit 2, that is Instructional Planning. First we'll discuss what are the aims and objectives of teaching English, since the instructional planning is done accordingly. First we'll discuss aims. Aims are often used interchangeably with objectives, but the features that distinguish aims from objectives may be summarized as follows. Firstly, these are broad statements of desired outcomes or the general intentions of research. Aims emphasize what is to be accomplished and not how it is to be accomplished. Aims address the long-term project outcomes, that is, they should reflect the aspirations and expectations. Once aims have been established, the next task is to formulate the objectives. Generally, a project should have no more than 2 or 3 aim statements, while it may include a number of objectives consistent with them. Aims are general statements that provide direction or intent to educational action. Aims may serve as organizing principles of educational direction for more than one grade. Indeed, these organizing principles may encompass the continuum of educational direction for the entire program or the subject area. The aims express the subject provider's broad purpose in presenting each program of study in the subject. Aims of teaching English can be perceived in 2 domains: language development and literary development. Aims of teaching English then can be said to have 2 things or 2 aspects: a linguistic aim and literary aim. Linguistic aim means that the students should be equipped with the 4 linguistic skills, that is the skill of listening comprehension, skill of speaking simple but correct and fluent English, skill of reading comprehension, and skill of writing correct, short and simple English sentences, that is so that they can express themselves in speaking and writing simple English. On the other hand, the literary aim encompasses 3 things: cultural aspect, language aspect, and personal growth aspect. As we have just mentioned, we can see that the 4 linguistic skills are listening, speaking, reading, and writing, which the student should master under the linguistic aim. So first, we will discuss the cultural aspect. In general, the term culture can be interpreted as the way of life of people inhabiting a particular geographic area. In the beginning of TEFL, the first understanding of culture prevailed. The grammar translation method, which was the predominant method of 19th century language teaching, presented students with thorough cultural knowledge with respect to literature and fine arts, as asserted by Larson Freeman. However, with the increase of English political influence, overseas voyages and colonialism, also the demand for communicative competence of foreign language learners increased, which led to the establishment of the direct method, a counter-reaction to the grammar translation method, argues Richards and Rogers. It also discussed cultural values, history, and geography, since in the perspective of the direct method, learning another language also involves learning how speakers of that language live. The successive methods of language teaching to emphasized providing their students with a cultural background to the extent which may help them succeed in communication. Depending on the focus of each method, the extent of attention paid to culture differed substantially. Some methods attributed to particular importance to it. For instance, the community language learning was only concerned with culture as long as it was integrated within the language. While other methods like the audiolingual method stressed that language cannot be separated from culture and that it is teachers' responsibility to provide students with cultural knowledge. In order to familiarize their students with the everyday lifestyle of native speakers, some methods like the communicative approach, also called attention to the use of authentic from life materials such as periodicals, audiovisuals, maps, so on and so forth. Now we come to the language aspect. The primary aim at initial level, language decides the personality of the individual, a mirror which reflects knowledge to develop language skills, that is listening, speaking, reading and writing, written as LSRW. The four aspects of language are semantics, phonetics, graphics and phonic-cum-graphic. Semantics is related to listening comprehension. Phonetics is related to sound production, spelling and pronunciation. Graphic skills are related to writing skills, and phonetic-cum-graphic are related to reading of printed matter or reading skill. One's command over language is to be assessed by the mastery of these four skills. Now we come to the personal growth aspect. Literature is used in English teaching practices for multiple reasons, the primary of which is personal growth of the learner. Literature then is used to broaden students' horizons by giving them a knowledge of the classics of literature, to improve the students' general cultural awareness, to stimulate students' creative and literary imagination, and to develop their appreciation of literature, to introduce students to masterpieces in British and American literature as an educative experience, and to add to students' knowledge of the world at large. Now, command of a language can be broadly classified under two headings: passive command and active command, as you can see on the slide. Passive command encompasses listening comprehension and reading, while active command of a language implies mastery in speaking and writing. Passive command then includes the receptive skills, while active command of a language includes the productive or the creative skills. Linguistic mastery of a language depends on the following elements. Number 1, grammar, then sociolinguistics, tools for interpretation and analysis of language and text, knowledge of texts, text forms and genres, text linguistics, composition, and media and communication with texts. There can be a multiplicity and diversity of aims. Aims might be stated in terms of a mixture of the following. Firstly, the meeting of local, regional or national need, followed by preparation for the prosecution of research. Next, preparation for the world of work, including satisfaction of professional body requirements. Social goals like the widening access to higher education or increasing the degree of student control over course selection or pattern of study, and enabling the students to continue to appreciate or pursue independent study in the subject. Now we come to objectives. Objectives are usually specific statements of educational intention which delineate either general or specific outcomes. Objectives are subsidiary to aims and are the steps one is going to take for a specific list of tasks needed to accomplish the goals of the project. Emphasize how aims are to be accomplished. They must be highly focused and feasible. Objectives address the more immediate project outcomes. They make accurate use of concepts. Objectives must be sensible and precisely described. They may be explained as expression of an individual statement to convey the intentions. Objectives are of different types. Some of the most popular or common ones are behavioral objectives, holistic objectives, non-behavioral objectives, problem-solving objectives, expressive activities that lead to expressive outcomes. The educational objectives set out the intended student learning experiences and student achievements that demonstrate successful completion of a program of study. A statement of objectives should communicate specific intentions for the student learning experience and learning outcomes. Intended student learning experiences and achievements are normally expressed in terms of the expected learning outcomes of the academic program and relate to the acquisition of knowledge, the development of understanding and other general intellectual abilities, the development of conceptual, intellectual and subject-specific skills, and the development of generic or transferable skills, or the development of values of motivation or attitudes to learning. The general objectives of teaching English in the elementary stage. What are they? By the end of the elementary stage and within the assigned structures and vocabulary for this stage, students should be able to learn the basics of the English language that would form the foundation for its mastery in the future, use the basic structure of English sentences, learn the core vocabulary assigned for this stage, listen to and understand simple English, express themselves orally using simple English, read and understand simple written English material, write simple guided sentences in English, develop an awareness of the importance of the English language as an international means of communication, develop an awareness of the importance of English language as an international means of communication in order to benefit from the achievement of the other cultures. What are the general objectives of teaching English in the secondary stage? By the end of the secondary stage and after acquiring the assigned structures and vocabulary assigned for this stage, students should be able to begin to utilize a basic level of English which would form the foundation for the mastery of the English language in the future, learn and use English structures assigned for this stage, learn and use the assigned vocabulary for this stage to enable them to express themselves clearly in different life situations, listen to, understand and communicate using English in a variety of topics, express themselves clearly and properly in English, read, enjoy and appreciate written English material, write essays in English, develop an awareness of the importance of English language as an international means of communication or as an international and national link language, develop an awareness of the importance of English language as an international means of communication in order to benefit from the achievements of other cultures. Now, what are the objectives of teaching English as set forth in the West Bengal Board of Secondary Education? In October 1974, the Parishad Barta published by West Bengal Board of Secondary Education introduced a pattern of education that put forward the following objectives of teaching English at the secondary stage. To enable the students to attain working knowledge of the language from the utilitarian point of view, since the requisite standard of working knowledge of the language must vary according to the varying social conditions, it is difficult to spell out the norm of the working knowledge language from the utilitarian point of view. But considering that it is prescribed as the compulsory second language for the most, it must be treated as a skill subject. To develop the capacity of the pupils to express themselves in English freely, correctly, and with proper pronunciation in talks on conversation and ordinary topics. To enable pupils to express their ideas of non-technical nature in simple and correct English. To generate in pupils a love of the language and a desire to cultivate it at leisure for pleasure and profit, though this objective is desirable but should not, according to the experts of the board, be stressed upon, because the purpose of examination is not testing mastery of the love of language. Test items in this respect should be sparingly accommodated in the question paper with the least weightage. What are the objectives of teaching English as set forth in the West Bengal Council of Higher Secondary Education? The curriculum of teaching English as prescribed by the West Bengal Council of Higher Secondary Education was first introduced in 1976-77. There were two separate course curriculum for English A or English First Language and English B or English Second Language. The curriculum for English B was subsequently revised in 1989-90 and then in 2004-05, then 2006 and lastly 2012. The recent revision explicitly prefers the objectives of teaching English A and B. The objectives of teaching English A as set forth by the Council in the booklet Curriculum and Syllabus, session 2012-14 were to train the students to a high level of competence in comprehension of all types of English texts, descriptive, narrative, discursive, reflective, etc. To train the students to a high level of competence in English composition, to train the students in literary appreciation and the more complex functions of language. As English A course is taken up by a small number of students, in some sense or other voluntarily, the scope and standard of the course should be at par with that of similar courses of other Indian boards and councils. The council further added that the proposed new course contains the following new features: introduction of course in English for specific purpose, including various practical application and professional uses, omission of the history of English literature and rhetoric and prosody in favor of the above-mentioned courses of practical orientation. Very few of the students need knowledge of literary history or rhetoric and prosody in their later lives and careers. Moreover, at the higher secondary stage, they can obtain practically no acquaintance with the range of authors and texts discussed. The selection of literary pieces has been thoroughly revised and updated. It now includes Shakespearean drama on the one hand, and on the other hand, a large selection of 20th century items, including works by recent authors, women writers, writers of Indian and other non-Western origin, and writers from disadvantaged groups as well as works on such themes like social justice, ecology, science, women's issues, etc. The insistence on the practical application and professional uses reveals a paradigm shift. The shift of focus from literary to linguistic and more practical use-oriented objective brings to the forefront the nature of the objectives of teaching English, even as a first language today. The objectives of teaching English first language thus gain a new dimension. Along with the traditional emphasis upon high level of competence in literary comprehension and appreciation, a new trend of setting a great premium upon the utilitarian aspects of English language comes to the forefront. The objectives of teaching English B, as specified by the Council of Higher Secondary Education, West Bengal, are as follows. To effect a smooth transition from the secondary to higher secondary level and from higher secondary to degree level, to enhance communicative skills which might satisfy workplace requirements, to enhance comprehension and writing skills with special emphasis on independent writing. This should incorporate coherent description in logical sequence, handling information, reporting a dialogue, composing reports, short dialogues, letters, and paragraphs. The changes envisaged by the Council are to shift emphasis from explanation of texts in classroom to developing writing skills through exercises from the text, selection of pieces on a much wider range of subjects and authors while keeping the length of individual pieces short, introduction of translation of English for developing vocabulary and skill in using language on one's own, comprehension to be based on passages from rapid reader and also from poems in the selection for necessarily from prescribed texts, objective type questions, précis writing and note making to be dropped. So now let's sum up. Aims are broad statements of desired outcomes or the general intentions of the research. They emphasize what is to be accomplished and not how it is to be accomplished, and address the long-term project outcomes, that is, they should reflect the aspirations and expectations. Aims of teaching English can be perceived in two domains, literary and linguistic. Literary aim has three aspects: cultural aspect, personal growth aspect, and language aspect. Linguistic mastery of a language depends on the following elements: grammar, sociolinguistics, tools for interpretation and analysis of language and texts, knowledge of texts, text forms or genres, text linguistics, composition, and media and communication with texts. Objectives are usually specific statements of educational intention which delineate either general or specific outcomes. They are of different types, and some of them are behavioral objectives, holistic objectives, non-behavioral objectives, problem-solving objectives, expressive activities that lead to expressive outcomes. Thank you.